controlling people. Yeah. So we wanted to make sure.
Opinionated or strong-minded people.
Yeah. So maybe we could just have leant back and say, well, you know what you're doing. So we trust your translator, but we wanted to make sure. So hopefully it will be really, really good as the Swedish version.
And when will the book be out? 15th of March, you said, right?
It will be published on the 15th of March, yeah.
And when did you write the original Swedish version?
The Swedish version was published in September 2019, so it's 1.5 years ago. Then the process of writing the book, that was a bit longer.
So tell us a little bit about that story, process of coming up with, I need to write the book, and tell us about that a little bit.
Well, if you had met me when I was 10, you wouldn't have been surprised that I wrote a book, but it would have been a book about horses or mysteries or romance. And I ended up writing a book on change management. And really the reason for that is that I participate in an organization, ACMP, Association of Change Management Practitioners. And in the Swedish chapter, we had really set our minds to see how do we drive the profession of change managers in Sweden. And of course, an important part is how are new generations educated in this topic? So we reached out to universities and high schools and tried to find what material did they use and in what classes did they train this.
Could you find some university courses that actually do teach change management?
Yes, as part of the maybe third or fourth year, mostly in engineering when you study project management. Yeah. And in this search, we came across Annette, who is now a professor at AIAW Academy, and she said, well, interesting thing, can we meet up? So we met for lunch, Maria and I from ACMP, and then Annette. And we talked about the process of change management and where does it fit in. And after 30 minutes, she said, should we write a book together? And Maria and I looked at each other and said, yeah. And it turned out that Annette has written several books before on project management and how to write good papers and so on.
And for people that don't know how to get started writing a book or how that process actually works, but may want to, how did you get started? Did you get some funding in the beginning? Did you talk to some publisher in the start, or how did you actually get started writing a book?
For us, it was really what we in Swedish call a räkmacka. I don't know what that's in English. But because
served on a plate.
Yeah, served on a plate by Annette, because she had written books for studentlitteratur, who produces books for universities. And so she called her publisher and said, I have this idea. I want to write a book together with two practitioners with an academic and a practical perspective on change management. And her publisher said, yeah, interesting. Can we meet? We had a breakfast with him when he was in Stockholm, and then we wrote a synopsis. And then we had a contract. So that's one way, if you meet somebody like Annette.
And you got money up front to do work?
No.
Okay.
But I mean, we...
so what does a contract mean, a promise to publish?
It's a promise to publish. And it means that you get a few kroners per sold book. So what we did was to invest our time. And the synopsis, we made that in May 2018. The contract was signed in June, and then we spent our summer holidays writing. So in the synopsis, we split the work between us. So all three of us started working on different chapters, and then we sort of sent them around in a system. And by September, we had the first version.
That's good work. That's really diligent work, it seems like.
Yeah, well, Maria and I said, yeah, why? We wrote a book, and then we met our publisher, and he tore it apart. And at that point, Maria and I said, it's never going to be a book. We totally suck at this. But I mean, Annette said, it's like Lego. I mean, you just take the pieces apart, and then you put them together, and you get something new. So we tore it apart, and we worked, I think, every weekend for the whole autumn. And then in January, we had the manuscript. So, I mean, we spent a bit more than half a year actively working on it. And then it turns out there's a very long process to publish a book. I mean, we thought, can we have the release party in March? Is that okay? And our publisher, no, maybe in September. And it was on September the 3rd.
Yeah.
So for Maria and me, this was a very slow process, and Annette had been in the game before, so she said, I've never done it this fast before.
And to end a little bit on this note, who is using the book, or who is your audience, or where is it used today?
The book was written to be used by students studying at universities in Sweden. So the books that were used were about 20 years old and or American, which means that they were very expensive, very extensive, and with examples and situations that it doesn't really apply to Sweden. And the articles were also very old. So what we wanted to do was to write for students, something that's 2018. And because Maria and I were engaged in ACMP, a lot of the change practitioners engaged said, well, that book could really be used at work, because we want to implement change management and add that to project management in our organization. So in the end, when it was published, I think for the first year, most copies were sold to practitioners, and we got a feedback that this is a really good book. This is something that's valuable even for somebody that had worked for some time as a change manager. And we thought, well, that wasn't the original intention, but it's a great thing. And now it's on reading lists for students. So now it's both.
Cool.
So both for students in academia, in their training, and practitioners using it. That's good. You aimed well.
And I have another topic that I'd love to bring up, perhaps not right now, but speaking about like Amazon and how they disrupted the whole book producing market, that would be really fun to hear your thoughts about.
Yeah. So we have let's come back to that. Yeah. I think we need to explore what's the difference between project management and change management. That's a good, interesting topic. But before we jump, let's start a little bit. Who is Anna, and what has sort of shaped you to become a change management practitioner? Or what's your story?
It's a long story. I'm a reluctant engineer, and I started working in the mid-80s. My first work was as a product specialist for hard disk drives at Ericsson, and I got the hottest, the new hard disk drive. It was this big. It weighed 10 kilos, and it contained, hold on to your horses.
How many kilobytes?
Yeah, well, 30. And it was so hot. And I endured for 9 months.
Hot from a temperature point of view, not from a sexy point of view.
Sexy. Hot, because, it had fans, but it's still, you couldn't touch it.
I thought you meant sexy, but you meant it was actually hot.
I sort of meant both, but he understood the other part as well. Yes. And I endured that for 9 months, but I'm not a product specialist. I'm not really an engineer. So I started working as sales and marketing. It was then Televerket, now it's Telia. And at that point in time, organizations started to have a need to connect their networks and their own switchboards. It was extremely expensive with data, extremely expensive making phone calls. And most of all, when you wanted to add new networks, you had to wait a couple of months for Telia to arrive. So radio links was what I worked with. And that was actually a new business for Telia. They actually sold the radio links to the organizations. So instead of owning the backbone, which has always been their business, they sold the radio links. So that was at the time when you only could buy from Televerket, end of the 80s. And that's how I got into networking, because what you wanted to do with the radio links was to connect networks. And in the beginning of the 90s, I started working for a company called UpNet. They were the first in Sweden to work with Cisco routers.
Yeah, I remember that. UpNet brought Cisco to the Nordics, I believe.
Yes.
Before Cisco even had offices or anything.
Yeah.
Here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when I joined in 92, Upnet, I think I was number 18. And when I left 2000, we were 4,500 people. Yeah. And Cisco in Sweden at that point was one guy, and then it became 3 quite quickly. And that was a time, John Chambers came to visit us because Sweden was so far ahead. Yeah. We really wanted to try out new technology.
And I think Upnet, you built Sunet, right?
Yeah, Sunet, the university backbone.
Which is the first internet or real backbone of telco or communications in Sweden, right?
Yeah, well, the defense organization might have had one as well, but yeah. And so Sunet and Televerk, yeah. When my kids that are 24 and 27, when they mess with me because I'm a dinosaur using my smartphone, I say, well, you can mock me, but I built the internet. So that's the only thing that I can tell them. So that was really an exciting time because networking was really expanding. And that was at the same time that Telia was not the only supplier of backbones and network connections. You got all the other companies coming in, building networks. So it was really an exciting time. We built some really big projects.
And of course, we are talking now, your storytelling is overlapping with the digitalization journey of Sweden, because here we are now, Upnet moving Cisco in, and then we move forward to 97, 99, and here we have the beginning of the internet bubble, and a massive upside of sort of building, doing new backbones for Handelsbanken, stuff like this, building up. There were several internet operators coming up, building both, I guess, the communication setup, but the whole storage, the whole, I guess, Sun server setups and all that, right?
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the internet bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. That was actually before the internet bubble,
yes.
And I remember
the infrastructure for the internet bubble.
Yeah, I was a sales manager going to the end of the 90s, and we had some strict rules when we had new customers. And one of my sales guys, he came to me and said, "And I have to talk about you. I have a customer that wants to buy some Cisco routers, but when I search their credibility, it's a guy in a room in Lund. It seems to be a student.
Maybe Bredbandsbolaget."
And we looked into this and said, okay, let's set up a meeting in here. And he had big plans, and it sounded crazy. But we looked at it and said, it's not that much money. Go sell him the router. And that became one of the biggest customers of Mercantil at the end of the 90s.
Yeah, there was this Birgersson, Bredbandsbolaget, buying his infrastructure from you and your sales guy.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, really.
And now we are sort of 99, 2000, somewhere there. And what's up? What's the next?
It was a fantastic journey to be both because Upnet grew and the whole revolution of the industry, and we everybody that worked there, we grew as professionals and as humans, but also to get all the structures. How do we sell in a good way? How do we deliver? Because there were huge projects, so we really started working with product management and having really good consultant and project managers. So I knew when I sold big projects that okay, I have the consultants and I have the project managers, and the customers are going to be satisfied. And then I was looking for some new challenge, and Upnet was Mercantil. It was a bit too big. It wasn't the same feeling. So I switched working with ERP systems. And I did that until I started working with Johan Pro Sales. And of course, I thought that it's the same. We have project managers and we deliver, and we have the customer requirements, and found a completely new world where you could deliver according to what they asked, and still they weren't satisfied. The last years I worked specifically with the automotive industry, an industry that's very... not at the forefront of technology outside of the cars. Also at that time it was a change, because before you had a monopoly. If you sold Saab, you sold Saab in a whole region, and that was all that you could sell. And when they joined with Opel, you could have both. But then EU decided anybody that fulfills the requirement can sell a brand. So the systems that had previously been built were built by Saab and placed at the dealers. Now there was a need for a system that interoperated with several manufacturers and a new generation of systems. And people were so frustrated.
So we're talking about the core ERP systems in automotive.
Yeah.
What type of systems is that?
For selling a car, putting all the
Dealer
pieces together.
Configurator.
The configurator, but also then sending the order to the car factory to handle all the accounting, when you come in for service and maintenance, and all your spare parts. To have that in a system that could handle that for different makes.
Several types of cars.
Yeah, several types of cars. And the previous systems, they had worked with them for maybe 10, 15 years, and they were optimized for one for example, Saab or Ford or Volvo, whatever. And now they got a very modern system that was really great, and people were so frustrated. People sat crying at their desks. And when I went out and sat down, it was, okay, what's happened? We said something is wrong with the system. It does not work. And our consultants said, yes, they do work, and we have trained them. And people tried to do exactly what they had done in the old system. They printed papers, even if it was supposed to, don't print, everything is stored, and it's sent to the guy down at spare parts. You don't have to walk over there with the paper.
So I hear a journey from systems to project, from project to change management.
Yeah. And at that time, I didn't know change management. I just knew that customers were frustrated and I was frustrated. So that was really, I saw that there is a need for something else.
So this whole idea of adoption and to get, it's not the technology that makes you rich or makes the car or the person or the customer happy. It's when they adopt it and can use it and that's when the value comes as a core principle.
Yes, definitely. And as humans in a workplace, what we think is value is value for me, for doing my task. And for these kinds of systems, that's the whole flow. And sometimes when we drive change and adopt new ways of working and change the processes, it might not be the best for me, but on a whole,
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But then this is a different type of change. Very exciting. But before we get into the whole topic of change, I'm just dying to get there. But it's,
I can tell.
But it's also, so then you did that, and what next?
Then I changed profession from sales to being a consultant. At that point, I didn't know I changed my profession. I just thought that I would go and apply what I knew about sales and the support customers. But working as a consultant is a very different role. Instead of being the one in charge and actually tell people what to do, you are just by their side, trying to encourage them.
Customers are always right in that sense.
Yeah, but you are not the one doing it. You are helping the customer do it.
And this is important now. We talk about one type of consultancy maybe when you are hired to code something, and you are doing the work and you give them a piece of code. But if you want to get a sales organization to sell more, Anna or Henrik is not going to in and do the sales. So whatever we do is about enabling and securing that the sales manager is doing the right thing and the sales guy is doing the right thing. So it's different from a technology consulting to change ultimately.
Yeah. And no matter what kind of change, even in working in new processes or using new ERP systems, I can be there in support, but it's always the manager that follow up and encourage and has to work with the individual. And sometimes when you, as a change manager, arrive at a customer and say, oh, you're here to save us. You are now going to do the change. So the kind of consultants that we were at ProSales, that was the kind of consultant that helps the customer achieve by themselves, but with guidance and support. And also a big change, especially being in sales, where you really lead teams and you win deals and you go for success. When you work as a consultant, when there is success, it is the customer. You are just a bystander. And that was a big change in the beginning to adopt to that, to just say, yeah, well done.
So you worked several years with ProSales. And you did, and what type of clients were you working with, and what were the type of projects? What do you do as a consultant within sales change management?
The Ericsson, the core 3, the training on how Ericsson should drive their sales projects involving people from change, delivery, and the product. The project. I haven't even started drinking my wine. No. I can't speak. A lot of projects with Ericsson actually facilitating workshops where we did these business cases with them, and we did that around the globe. Also Scania Mining, that were driving a new way of selling. Instead of selling trucks and buses and motors, they were working towards an industry with all the products. So a completely new way of selling. We work with Ricoh in a change in their situation, going from selling copy machines to actually being an IT supplier.
So really, their whole offering changed, and therefore the whole way of selling needed to change.
Yeah. Those were some of the biggest, but also working with some of the newspapers and banks and different kinds of customers.
So it was change management in relation to a specific domain of sales operations, you could say.
Yeah.
And then I understand that at some time you went after pro sales and started to apply change and working with other industries. So when was that, and how did that come about?
That was 2014, after 7 years on pro sales. I knew sales. So driving change and applying that to sales was my comfort zone, after a while at least, when I had learned to be a consultant. But then to say, okay, can I do this in any context? So working with companies where in completely different industries and different kinds of changes, but still where you need to change the way people work, the way people behave.
Yeah, so the common denominator here is that we want to address behavior and ways of working. And here we have a salesman's role or a sales manager's role. But of course, if you are changing system in the accounting or the finance role, is change management and adopting the new way of working that comes with whatever change is needed, wherever new system is coming in.
Yeah. So I since 2016, I have my own company and work in all kinds of change management projects. So from GDPR, that's some people think that might be just technicalities, but it's all about change in behaviors, and that's where the really tough part is. Still working with changes for sales organizations. What we saw around 2010, where more and more sales moved to being e-business. What is then the role of a traditional salesperson? Sometimes I've also worked with municipalities where a lot of digitalization, AI, and that affects behaviors in different ways.
So would you say that more and more of your work is driven on the basis of digitalization? Job descriptions change. Yeah. And based on that, in order to get value out of digitalization, change management in connection with this is one core part of what you really work with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, today it is.
And we're soon going to jump in. But I think one small paragraph before we go into deeper other topics. Tell me a little bit about how you work and organize your company, because I think you're working in a super relevant modern way in constellations fitting for the need at hand. Could you elaborate on how you thought about your own entrepreneurship and how do you work, to effect change, which is of course maybe sometimes more than Anna needed.
Yeah. I wanted to be able to pick the projects that I engage in and the customers that I work with. Not so much, this company, but these kind of people. Where do I want to engage? And also to be able to do different projects and then work together with people that I really trust and that can support me with other kinds of expertise or more of what I have when that is needed. So today sometimes I'm asked by somebody to fill in their project and I bring in people that I trust. I have an old colleague from UpNet. We started working together in 92. I mean, that's many, many years. And we always said that when we have our own companies, we will be working together. Yeah, we will. So now we are. So I work with project managers, change managers, sales professionals to really work with the customers, depending on what the customer needs. And I don't have okay, this is the way I offer to work with you. Sometimes I go in and take the role as the change manager in a project or in a change. Sometimes I train project managers or leaders in change management. Sometimes it's about giving a lecture or just being a speaker at a conference. And sometimes it's about coaching throughout time for people that struggle with change. So I can adopt that to what the customer needs. And I think that was important. Coming from sales, it's all about the customer. But of course, what do I think is fun? I want to work with what makes me tick. Yeah.
But I think actually in one way it's a little bit about choosing who you want to work with and having fun. But I think there is a bigger, profound realization here. I mean, like the way I work now with Derax and the consultancy I'm running is you get to a point where depending on what the use case is, what you want to do, you need super niche expertise. And if we bring that into the data AI space, it is really a different team if I have a BI project on my hand, or if I want to do neural networks and a recommender system. And then should I then have a company with all these consultants sitting in one company? Will one single company have this competence on really deep level, or do we handpick the best constellation for the job at hand? So I think this is quite modern.
Yeah, and it's about the skills and the knowledge that people have, and it's also the way of working, because cultures are different.
Yes.
So even if you have the skill, maybe you're not the best to work with this customer.
This is so true.
Yeah. And especially driving change, because change it's so much about getting under the skin of people, gaining trust, and so you really need to fit in the culture.
So the Fingerspitzengefühl on who is the right profile person is the one hand, and also is the cross-functional team is a constellation of different disciplines and skills, and then we know we can't have any fat, right? We need to have the right people for the right job at hand.
Yeah,
I agree.
Definitely. And when you're on your own, you really need to make sure you use the resources in the best way. You don't just idle around.
No.
Do the necessary thing and.
But this is a great introduction of Anna, I think, and it has taken us into the change management topic. Anders, why don't you start us off on any questions that you want to explore? And I have many, but where do you want to start?
Well, thanks for the question. And from a techie person, it's interesting to hear and sometimes a bit hard to follow also these kind of discussions. So I think it's if we try to
can't follow my discussion.
So if we were to try still to make, the discussion we're having a bit more concrete, and if we take, for example, change management and just start to try to define what do you mean with change management? Can you try to define it in a concise way to make people perhaps outside your business understand what that is all about?
The short version is that it's the people side of a change. A product manager can handle the technical side of a change, and a technical side it doesn't have to be about computers or technology. That could also be designing a new organization to actually say, okay, these are the roles we need and these are the skills we need for each role. Change management is about having the people affected by this to actually embrace, adopt, and use that the solution that the technical side brings.
I think actually you mentioned in the beginning a good example of what the need is for this and what is the problem you're trying to solve. one way you said these kind of ERP systems you try to sell, I guess, and in some way you thought it was an amazing system and it should make everyone happy, but in reality it did not, right? And that is the problem of change. That I guess that some people, or is that really the point? And even if you have a great project or product or service that you want to sell, that perhaps people don't really want to adapt to it or change in the traditional way they work. Is that really what you try to solve? Or
I mean, it's in the end, it's about, do people want to change? Do they see a benefit? Do they want to get on the ride? Do they want to do this? And it's the same problem like with any invention. You can have the best product, exactly, but if nobody knows about it or buys it, you won't make a success. I'm sure throughout history there have been so many excellent innovations that never happened. And in organizations, if we talk about within organizations, somebody has spent a lot of time saying, okay, we don't work in the best way within the company. We need to change that. So we get some system support to change the way we work, and they set up requirements, and they have been really thinking hard about it and choose between solutions and decide. And they have spent a lot of time and really understand, why do we need this? Why is this best solution? And usually what happens is that it's announced to people, okay, we now have this system, and then you train people to use it. And actually the person at the desk, it's sort of just landed in their knee as okay, why is there a problem? I don't understand. Why is there a problem?
I've been working the same way. It was fine for me for the last 10 years. Why do I need to change to this stupid system process?
Yeah, and for somebody that doesn't have the full view and hasn't spent as much time, I usually get told that people, they just don't want to. Well, have you actually walked in their shoes to try to understand what do they see from their point of view? Because you see the full picture. What do they see when they look at it? So, just go to yourselves. Nobody wants to get told to do something. Yeah. I say, why?
I mean, perhaps this is a good segue to the book as well. And we actually started speaking a bit about that in the beginning. And why can you perhaps start speaking a bit more about, why did you start working with this book? What is the need you're trying to help with the book that you wrote?
To get an understanding that there is nothing wrong with project management, but it needs some add-ons. And
so it's not sufficient with project management. It needs something else. Is that what you're saying?
If what you're implementing requires people to change behaviors or ways of working, then it won't be. And then how much change management you need depends on what kind of change and what are people's thoughts about the change. But what we wanted to do by writing the book was to really look from a Swedish perspective. I mean, the size of the companies we have here, the culture that we have here. How can we make sure that we start sending people out of universities with the knowledge of change management? Because it's not just about having good change managers. You also need people in an organization asking for change management, for leaders to say, yes, we are going to do this. We need project management and we need change management, to put that in.
And the book is called Förändringsledning, is that correct?
Yeah.
And
change management.
It's being translated to English right now, right?
Yeah. And
that the name of the English version will be what? Have you defined that?
Yes, or? Change management.
Really? Oh, that's simple.
So why make it? Why make it difficult?
Okay, so perhaps then one additional question, and perhaps just to make it a bit more easy to understand for people like me as well. If we were to find some concrete example that we can talk around, perhaps something you brought up in the book, or taking something like, I know my mother, for example, she was forced into a digitalized journal system, working as a nurse. And that was a horrible experience for her, and she hated every minute of it. And probably because the product at that time was really bad. But still, do you have a good example that we can speak around so we can understand the differences between project management and change management in some good way?
We can take a small example from a municipality. I have that in the book. What they were going to do was to digitalize all the paperwork needing for the public meetings. So, I mean, that's regulated in law. You need to send out all the documents for a meeting a certain amount of days before the meeting. Everybody needs to bring them, and a lot of photocopying. And what they wanted to do was to digitalize it. So everybody would have an iPad with an app, and all the documents would be pushed to that app. Right. So, I mean, then they could be, you didn't need to copy it, it didn't get lost in the mail, and nobody would forget it when they came to the meeting. In the municipalities, the steering, they are politicians on their free time, which means that they had other work during the daytime, and the ages reached from 20 years to 82.
Ooh, that's
so if it was a project, it would have been, okay, we need iPads. We will write a manual on how to create an Apple ID, how to download the app and how to use the app. And then we will bring in the suppliers and we will book training so people can use it, and then we go.
And that should work for 82-year-olds as well at that point. Yes. Okay. The chairman was very visionary, and also the IT department said, okay, maybe we should do this in a different way because we might have some problems. And we had been working with them in other projects before that. So we took another approach to say, okay, what do we need to do in terms, how do we bring everybody on board? We don't want to bore the 20 years old and tell them how to create an Apple ID. And the 82-year-olds, well, they might have grandchildren, but we can't just assume that they will know it. So the first thing was to bring on the IT department and say, okay, we're going to do this a bit differently. We are going to ask you to work in the evenings because that's when they have their meetings. That's when people can do this. And for you to actually be support and walk around in the room and support people. And we got them on board. So we'd never done anything like it, and I don't think people will learn, but okay, we'll do this. We started before their meetings. Those that wanted help could come there and create it. And also the chairman, we had 15 minutes in the beginning of the first meeting where he's told everybody, why are we doing this? Why is this important? Why are we going away from the papers, moving into iPads? And we understand that for some of you, this is going to be challenging, but we have support. And these guys are here to support you. And the first phase was just create your Apple ID. And then the next meeting a month later is download the app. And that was then the training with the supplier. We had 1 hour at the beginning of their meeting. Had never happened before that you could do that kind of stuff in those official meetings. And then the third time, those that wanted could actually use that one instead of the papers. So they could read, take notes, and just use the iPad. And at the beginning of that meeting, we talked about, okay, have you all been able to open the app? Are there any problems? Guys from IT, they are here, and they walked around during the whole meeting, so around the table helping people. And then the fourth time, it was only digital. And the people at the administration say, it's never going to work, just go like that. So they were in the back with a lot of stacks of paper. And it actually worked. And afterwards, the IT guys said, when you told us about doing it this way and involving people and adapting it to all and involving the chairman to speak about it and take time out of their meetings, we thought you were crazy, but okay, let's try. And said, we have never had a project go this smooth. And it took so much less time that we had calculated. So had it been a project, it would have been rolled out and it would have been delivered, but it probably wouldn't have worked.
But let me summarize from another angle now, because I think this around change management boils down to how do you define a metric of a successful implementation, operationalizing AI or a project, And typically, what me and Anna found early is that, even all the way back.
People should maybe know that you have worked together.
Well, we have worked together.
Yes.
Actually, we worked. I worked in Uppnet Merkantil, and we worked at the same time there, but not really close. But then we work a little bit closer in pro sales, but on other projects. But how should I put it? I share your journey. I share your understanding of the journey and what I do today. And the way we have talked about this is a little bit like, how do you define success of an AI project or any systems project? Is it that you have implemented a system? Is it that you have done the training? Or is it the metric of adoption and people are working in a new way? And for me, change management is a little bit like, when I go in, I can spend, I have 10 million in budget. Do I spend all 10 million on pure technology? Probably not going to work. I need to spend a little bit of money on project management, to organize the technicalities of how I build topics. And then Anna says, and I say, actually, have you thought about making adoption your metric? And do you have a strategic design for how you're going to drive change? So as if you're it's like amazing, right? We spend 1 billion for a system change, and we have professional stuff, how we work with the system part. And then all of a sudden we stop. It's like doing a marathon and stopping, 5 kilometers out from the goal and say, I'm not going to plan and I'm not going to orchestrate the last kilometers. I'm just going to take that. I'm going to roll with that on a hunch.
Would you agree with that, Anna?
Yes, definitely. And your question about the difference between project and change management. Project management, it has a set of ways of working, and it's very well defined with roles and the goals you have. And the project, when you close the project, that's when the solution is delivered and accepted. Change management goes on, because change management is about actually when you started a project, you wanted some return on investment. Yes. So change management is really bringing home that return on investment. So that could go, and then the question is, okay, for how long? And it's okay, so how long is a rope? Because the speed of adoption will depend a lot of how well prepared was it. Change management is often brought in a couple of months after the project has been closed, because they didn't get the return on investment and we need to change people. But if you have it from the beginning, then you get that earlier.
But let me give an example then from a tech point of view as well. And I'm not, let's say a company I worked for in the past, and we had this kind of discussion about we want to change a part of a product, some kind of service, and let's just for sake of argument say it was about the color of some button. It was not, but still, it's some kind of change in how a product worked. And then we had a choice of either doing the data-driven A/B testing kind of thing and trying to see what really does work and what will make users more happy. And then you have a more like experienced senior product owners that know and have a lot of experience in traditionally these kind of changes will work or not work. And I know from that time it was a lot of heated discussion about why the data-driven like A/B test did not show the true value, and it was measured wrongly or the data wasn't collected properly. And in reality, the experience that senior product owners have always trumps in some way what the data says in some way. That was a big conflict, I know, and really hard. And it's partly true. Data that is used to try to drive an A/B test can be very wrong in many cases. But this was a big conflict. And let's say that, what do you think is wrong with that? How can we do it better? If we were to say that, okay, we want to make this change in the product. We want to make either change A or change B. We don't know which one, but we're going to find out somehow. And then you can choose to do it by having people that are experienced and know from past what works and does not, and then data that may be wrong, but at least it's in some sense objective, hopefully. But then people have such a big skepticism in some way for doing that, and it was really hard to make them accept, so to speak, the results of these tests. How should you make that transition in becoming more data-driven, more successful? We had a lot of problem with that.
And that is the same kind of challenge that we have when we start interacting with robots and whatever is not human. You had a discussion a few programs ago about doctors and AI, and we want to interact with humans even if they are more faulty, because we trust humans.
Right. And you apply a trust for a sentiment coming from a human than some kind of metric from a data, right?
Yeah. And how do you then do that? So you have to recognize that is the case. Whatever comes from a computer or data driven is going to be looked at with skepticism. Right. How do we involve humans and how do we make it human? And find the individuals that others will trust to help them. I'm not exactly sure of what kind of data you're looking at, but for example, with chatbots, people don't really like that. You want to talk to somebody. But if you have a chatbot make typos, they misspell, and I mean they act more human, then people are more they want to continue the conversation. Right. And so how can you make the data more human? Because that is a challenge. Even if those that are born now, that are born into a digital society, our brains look for something human, and that's why we get so annoyed at computers, because we think they are human and they just don't understand us. It's like being rejected by a person, which is a horrible feeling. So,
but I think we can go into a new topic here, and I think the main theme here is the implications of succeeding with augmented intelligence. Because in one way here, I mean, like to do a recommender system behind the scenes that no one really knows about, that then is consumed in Spotify, and everything I feel I get a better intuitive user experience, doesn't really drive a change management problem necessarily. If you design it well enough, the experience will be good. But if I flip it now and say, I want to augment a 60-year-old surgeon in his daily ways of working as a surgeon.
And you have parents working in this area, so you have experience on this.
I'm talking about, hi Gunnar, that's my father, born 53. But if I take the example now that someone would come to my father and to say, I want you to put on Google glasses and have the AI brain next to you. And then they have the fundamental topic, how he has been trained. Actually, how he has trained hundreds of doctors in his career. And now he needs to change the way he looks at his process. How is my process as a surgeon going to be when it now is augmented with AI? So if we take that, so let's talk about my father is now, I mean, like the hospital wants to change this for everyone. This is the case study. And ultimately, in the end, we're going to have super senior överläkare, that is, the gods. And then you're going to have junior doctors. And then you're going to have nurses. And all of a sudden, they're going to have an AI-based system.
Let's make this simple. If Anna were to help your father make a change, how would you do it, Anna?
Yeah, well, actually, let's see who's the sponsor. So my father was head of the surgeon department for Drottning Silvias barnsjukhus. So I guess he could be the sponsor here. He could, when he had that role, he would have been the sponsor of an AI project. How they do.
Let's make it a bit more clear. Let me, as an AI tech person, come up to your father and say, I have this awesome robotic surgery product. It can do surgery much better than you ever can, and now you should start using it. Why don't you?
But let me make the situation a little bit more tricky.
Okay.
Because if
I think that's hard enough. By the way.
No. Because if my father got engaged with a good tech person, it's about then him convincing selling to my father, and then my father would be on board from the beginning, and maybe together with this tech person engage and build the project. But I make it even worse. The boss of my father is saying they have a really cool AI system they use in Karolinska, and tomorrow you should start using it.
Okay.
So he's not even it is not his baby. That's I'm saying. Like, one part is, how do you change when it's your baby, and then it's my father who needs to drive maybe the change. I like this and I want to change it in organization, but typically my father got it because Karolinska does it. So how do we go about that dilemma or project?
Yeah, and this is a discussion in many organizations today, because many want to talk about teams driving the change and agile teams, and they come up with a suggestion. But the reality is that sometimes they tell you to use what Karolinska did, and you can't argue with it.
Exactly.
Or GDPR, yes, it's here. You can't say, no, I won't do it. So you just have to buy into it. And those that is the kind of change that the book is aiming at, because that is the toughest part.
Case.
And in the case, if they say it's been chosen and you start using it tomorrow, that would be the typical one where I get in after some time. And then you have to do some backward engineering to see, okay, why was this chosen? And start to involve everybody that has a leading role to say, okay, can we form a coalition with those that had influence here? And to really talk about what is... If you could have chosen, what would have been a reason to do this? And what is your greatest fear doing this? Because it's about you get a new colleague. Can you trust that colleague?
The AI colleague.
The AI colleague. And a lot of, that's the case in social security work in many municipalities. They have a colleague that is a robot. So you get a new colleague. Can you trust that colleague? And what if that colleague is better than I am? What am I going to do? Now, I'm sure there will still be need for surgeons as long as he's working. But if you're in your 40s and you start to wonder, okay, what am I going to do if they replace me with robots? And many times, okay, but then the robot can do some things and you can focus on developing and doing other parts. And if your father is a bit like you, he would probably buy into that. But those that don't, that are really held back by fear. So backward engineering is really about, okay, what do we don't want to do to explain to people what are the situation going forward? If they have a colleague, what would their work look like? What's your father's work in 1 year, in 2 years? What does his work day look like?
So let's break down like the mechanisms here. So basically we're trying to understand, help me now.
What is the change?
What is the change all about? To take whatever we are taking fluffy now. We are not talking fluffy. What change is a little bit like concretely, Dad, how did you do this procedure before, and how is the best way to do it now with this augmented approach? To really be concrete on that. This is to really uncover all the bullshit, all the hype, down to what is the concrete difference in ways of working. This is one.
Is that really what you recommend, or how would you go about doing this?
This is one component.
That's one layer of it.
Yes.
Then you have the top layer. Okay, now that you need to change the way you work, and with training that could be done if you have a motivation for it. But on top of that, okay, but how will my role as a surgeon, somebody that people comes to for expert advice.
Yes.
Now I have somebody that actually is more expert than I am. What will my role look like? What's going to be in that role? So when I do my surgery, this process will change, but also my role will change. What is that going to look like? To really envision what that will be going forward.
Yeah, so we are building a foundation here where it starts with the very concrete stuff, and then you go into the personal perspective of that individual's roles, I guess.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. And then I think also another key area we can talk about is comfort zone. Because typically we all have our comfort zones, right? This is behavioral change, and you are used to doing things in a certain way, and now I stretch you. So there's layers of different things that needs to be addressed for this to really accelerate. I think that's one way of...
But if we try to just close this topic a bit and just have, if people that read your book want to know, or people that should read your book rather, what kind of advice, if you were to summarize it very briefly, could that be? So I guess you can do things in a very wrong way. I think we explained a number of really bad ways to do change management, and simply saying, just do product management. Here is a new product. Please use it. That won't work, right? And then, what do you do to alleviate that? How do you make that process, the change process, better? If you were to try to just, in 3 bullet points or something, try to summarize, what can you do to improve that? How would you summarize that?
For those that initiate change, projects or initiatives or whatever you want to call it, consider change management from the very beginning when you set up. Listen to somebody.
Before you start a project even.
Yeah, before you start the project and with everybody involved.
Yeah.
And involve people that are actually going to be affected earlier than you think. Many organizations, they want to have the perfect solution and all the answers before they start communicating, which means that people, they don't even have the last kilometer. They're this close and now it's happening. So they can't really digest it. So take it into consideration, involve people earlier than you think, and then keep going. Because even if you did a lot of good things and you follow the book, not everybody will be there when you thought. You will have to continue to have some perseverance, go through with it. Many people that are creative and find new things, they also lose interest a bit early. So before the project is ready, they found something new. Right. So that is for the sponsors for a change, to hold on to them for dear life throughout and to stay there until you actually have the return on investment. Because if somebody like your father, if they have had several projects like this at the hospital, and they know that they never go all the way and sometimes they end early or it's changed along the way, you don't engage. People don't engage. So you have to be very clear on, okay, why is this change going to be different?
I think it's connected a lot to what we have said a bit in a previous episode as well, to commit to deploy in some way. And what we have mentioned in that past is that I think what you said, was really profound now, which is, even before the project start, you should really speak to the stakeholder and the real users to make sure that they are on board and, are excited about, doing this even before it starts and having their feedback, how to do that. But then also not to just build a prototype and stop there and say, now I'm going to move on to the next thing. And to really be able to move the prototype into production and being able to have that integrated properly into the business processes that you have is something that I think a lot, especially in AI, people are missing. So I think it connects really well to what we have said.
Okay,
right?
I get goosebumps, Anders. I get goosebumps because Anders likes to get nerdy on the technical side, and he always tells me, we should go deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah. So now, Anders, you should not stop me from going deeper on this topic.
Please, I will not.
So
maybe.
Okay. So the bottom line we are talking about now is that if you don't have the commitment to deploy, we are talking about how do we do data and AI as industrialized, data and AI ready. We are living, breathing it. We have changed our operations. We are working. We are in a different era right now, vision, right? And then we say it starts with one single use case or project that, if your idea is that you will prototype something, dip your toes, you're never going to get it. And then, we had a passionate discussion with the techie guys, commit to deploy. Now, let's talk about what commit to deploy really means, Henrik and Anna perspective, because it's not the same as when they talk. Okay. So for me, when I work at Scania now, let's take the own example here is how does a use case life cycle look like? How does that idea phase, validation, development, adoption, industrialization, continuous improvement look like? And what do we do now with the business people, with the technology people in the early phases? You said it. We need to start committing them early. So when I talk with my guys, I do the change management in the ideation phase, and then I do something else in the design phase, and I do something else in the development phase. And then, by the way, now we have built a system. It's fantastic. I have 3 stages left. So commit to deploy means 3 more stages than what the tech guys think it means.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, let's take a use case life cycle. How would we see this how is the perfect change management process? Or no, actually the use case life cycle from idea to production in the perfect book example, how you would like to see this from the user or business perspective. So when should they be involved? What's the idea phase? When do we do these things to work in a sort of the right order of attack, the optimized order? Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so. And you will have to correct me if I didn't. But it's back to what we talked. You should involve people much, much earlier than you think. That's the bottom line of it. And to really talk about the different perspectives, when you bring a lot of different people on board, why are we doing this? Really in the early stage when you are just playing. And
so I give us a lingo now, and then we follow that together to really dissect this now. So now we're in the ideation stage. Someone has a cool idea that we could do AI, and they master up some sponsorship and get some ideas here. So
you bring in the guys that are the ones that would always raise their hand and say, I have a question. And you permit them to tell you why this won't fly.
Exactly. In the idea phase.
Good. In the idea phase, because that's when you will find, okay, what kind of resistance will we meet when we move on? And some things you will be able to take away really early. And the guys that some people say, okay, they don't want to do anything. But what they really do, they are the ones that can see the flaws and see what could stop us. And they know the way that they work or whatever. So they could really be valuable. So the people in the organization, those that are going to use it,
because systematically, then like if we go a lean startup kind of idea, I don't want to spend a lot of investment on AI guys like Anders on some things that I can identify in 2 meetings. It will never fly. Bottom line, right?
Yeah, or you could tell Anders that you have this excellent idea and this is what we want, but they are telling us these things won't fly. How can we handle that? Because then Anders can help you solve that, or some things maybe not. And then when you move on, you can tell people that, okay, this is what we're going to do. We know this will be difficult and we can't handle it. So you will just have to live it. Sometimes what people do is try to sell traditionally when they come with changes. They just
push.
Talk about all the good things. Life is going to be great, and this will solve all our problems. And you create a picture that you will never be able to deliver on.
Okay, so now we take one step more. So now we have concluded that the naysayers or the question sayers, who might be, it's both about understanding resistance and change that you will come up with, but maybe also get some good ideas how you define something early. Now we go into some sort of feasibility validation stage. So the idea has gone through, and we are now trying to sort of feature engineer. We're trying to build the system. So what's the change perspective in this validation or prototype stage? What's the change part here?
Again, it's seeing, what we thought in the beginning would change. Is that what's happening? Yep. And what kind of reactions, again, here, bring the naysayers in. What reactions do we get when we try to validate it? But I think this would be the phase where you don't need it as much as in the beginning and then in the next step. But still, they should be there.
Yeah, and then the prototype shows good results. We built the model and it proved successful, and now we say, okay, let's scale this up. So now we go into hardcore development from a small model, and now we're going to deploy it. So we're actually going to not only think about the model itself, but we're going to think about how it's used, how it's consumed, in what stage it fits, and of course, technically, we're going to put it in production. What's the change management perspective of the development side to deploy it so it will be used?
It's really connecting it to the processes and new ways of working. How will this influence it, and what do we need to do to handle it going forward?
So it's a lot about the usability, right? So we have an AI and it's a recommender system as an example, but how will it actually be used in everyday life? So in the development side, it's the usability aspect of, this is a great AI, but it's too much information to do in such a short time. I need to simplify the GUI or whatever.
But I think it's a bit more. I can just speak abstractly about one project at least that we try to imply or implement. And we were trying to use AI to simply make the process more efficient for humans. I think that's the best way to use AI. But still, and let me just speak. I can't speak in exact details, but I can mention briefly that we had to set up a process that meant that humans, day after day, went through a number of documents, and we're trying to say yes or no, we can comply with this requirement or not. If you can comply with the requirement, they can sell the product that they have. If they cannot, then they won't sell the product. And it's a lot of work to go through all the documents and the product descriptions. They have PDF documents and whatnot. But that was what the humans were doing. And they had a huge number of people that went through all the documents and tried to see, do they comply or not, by a set of like 50 requirements or something.
So it's an AI system for RFQ type.
RFP.
Request for proposals.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we said, obviously this is very time consuming for humans to do. Going through a large number of PDF documents is not an easy thing for humans to do. Perhaps we can just help by having an AI system in the loop, so to speak, to search through the things. And then we built a system, and then we had an evaluation, with the people that were accustomed to using it in the traditional way. And they felt, this is a bit strange, Why can't I simply, use my Excel sheets? Why can't I simply, search in the PDF documents in the normal way I do? And we didn't, I would say, do the proper change management in that case. And I'm trying to think, how could we have done it differently? And I think you already said the answer in some way. We should have actually spoken to the people working with this in the beginning and saying, if you were to do this in a more efficient way, how would you like to do it or something? We instead, did it the opposite way and said, okay,
we did something great for you.
Yeah,
this is a present for you. Aren't you happy?
Yeah.
And that is the case in so many solutions of this kind.
Yeah.
And one, of course, is they weren't involved. But then the second part is, anybody can understand, okay, if we save a lot of time, will we downsize? Will I lose my job?
Exactly. Yes.
So, a basic human reaction is, okay, who's going to have to leave the company? And then many say, but then you can spend time on doing more complex stuff.
Yeah.
And that is correct. But then you have to be very clear on, okay, what is the things that you want people to do instead? What kind of skills do they need? Do they have them? And to talk to everybody, because some people actually enjoy going through, filling out Excels. That is, that's fulfilling. Some people have got accustomed to fill in the Excels. Yeah. So they just need to get out of that pattern. Yeah. And some will say, finally I can go and do this. But you need to be clear on that part. So not just involve them, but also have a very clear vision. And I would say that almost every management team miss out here. You don't consider, okay, what do we want to do with these people when we have the AI? What should they do instead? And how do we talk to people? And how do we handle?
Do we have a story here?
Yeah, the story, but also to be very. That's another reason why many projects fail. Okay, if somebody won't move on, what are we going to do? Just because you were right in a position, if you were excellent at filling out the Excels for 20 years, maybe you're not right when you are in a more consultative role or whatever they wanted to do with these people. And then what do we do? Do we help them to train for something else? Do we give them an exit? And managers that's at least my experience. Walk away from that and say, okay, but if they don't like the new job, they will get another. So this is an important part of change management. So, okay, when we have this fantastic tool, what's then going to happen with our group?
And I'd just like to add, because I think it's so often that you phrase AI in the terms that it will replace jobs. And I actually do not think that's the most common scenario. So just to at least give my view on what really happens is that instead of replacing humans, I think they can actually augment humans. And I think, it's a big difference to what AI can do today or what humans can do today. And just to make that, difference clear, AI, for example, can go through a huge amount of data very quickly. It can go through 1,000 PDF documents in a second. A human cannot do that. And then it can recommend perhaps these are potential, pieces of information that you can make use of. And then a human, which has a much broader knowledge and a more generic type of reasoning, can ingest that information in a much more intelligent way. And by combining, the two, I must argue, you have the best of both worlds. So then you have something that can go through a huge amount of data, AI, and you have a much deeper type of reasoning from humans that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And if you just do the human, they can't go through all the data, so you don't have the context. But with the data and human combined, I would argue you get the best of both. And then you don't replace humans. You simply make them more efficient and increase the quality of the work you do.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I'm absolutely on the same page there. But that is not the way that we see it in society.
Exactly.
Currently, it's a shift in
it's
paradigm.
It's not the way it's portrayed. And I think that's a so dangerous view that is being portrayed.
Yeah. But I think this is, I get goosebumps all the time now because it's, for me, this
Maybe
is...
Maybe you're just cold.
No, it could be, but it's, I think we are profound in the terms that we are getting into some of the core topics. So one of the core topics is how we really understand AI and how it really benefit. And I can't see it benefiting in any other way than augmented intelligence for the foreseeable future. But as soon as you say that is a fundament, that's the way AI is going to be done, it means orchestration of change in order to augment the behavior of the individual person is going to be a first-class concern. So actually, for you to succeed with your vision, how much is tech and how much is people is the fundamental question then. And to me then, it becomes this statement, to succeed, operationalizing AI is not about robots, it's about people. And that's, and then basically, how do we now design and invest? How do we invest as companies in the change part in relation
and if I may add to that, robots and AI, two completely different things as well. Very little AI in robots to start with. But, so okay, that's another question. But,
but AI, so to adopt algorithms or recommender systems is more about people than the algorithm.
Well, or you can phrase it like, the way that products are built today are too much focused on the tech part and too little on the people part.
Yes, but I think this is also interesting. We can take another angle on this. There is one thing how we have had recommender systems succeed quite well in the consumer space, with like Spotify using recommender systems or Amazon using recommender systems, versus when we take AI and recommender systems into B2B space or professional professions. How we need to change the public, like a public servant or a doctor, or even now I'm talking about how the job is done in a manufacturing plant. So I think there is it's a complication here. Like intuitively, the best AI I think today, which is augmenting the human doesn't even know the AI is there. I mean, like a beautiful system.
I would phrase it like differently. The horrible parts of the digitalization process that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. Take the nurse example. Having to write in the journal in a computer instead of writing with pen and paper has been a horrible process. It's been really bad. And if we can use AI, which is different from digitalization, to make that process much more natural, that will actually make this digitalization process much more smooth and easier to use. I hope people see the differences here between digitalization and AI.
Elaborate on this, Anders, because I don't think people get the difference here. Because what you are saying now, if we're using AI technique like natural language processing, which allows me even to talk to the computer or, to do whatever I do, and the AI then translates them into systematic process instead of me having to type it all. So now I'm talking about even the AIs seamlessly integrating with how people normally work. And it's basically making the translation over to the systematic approach that we don't really... That's a quite interesting distinction.
A quick example, then I'd like to move into another topic with you as well, about Amazon, etc. But just to give an example of this, because I think it's important to see. And if we take the medical domain once again, and we can see previously, you had as a medical profession to sometimes fill out a form saying this is the ICD-19 code of doing whatever diagnosis you had, or you have to fill out this kind of marker or cursor-based kind of diagnosis that you have or symptoms that you have. Instead, if you simply could write in natural language saying, this is actually what happened, and I write it in Swedish or English, and then you have an AI that can understand natural language text, you don't have to have this kind of very structured and not really well formatted kind of forms that doesn't really fit what we would like to write. You can simply write what you mean and then use AI to understand that. And I think that makes it easier for the humans. It makes it more efficient in the end to process it, because you have a more flexibility in write what you want.
Yeah, because then there is an advantage to me.
Yes.
I get it. There is a very strong why when I go into it. Yeah. But I can totally understand. I think you said your mother worked as a nurse, because digitalization, which means instead of paper doing it digitally, that has been driven by cutting down workforce. Yeah. And I mean, in hospitals, for example, all the secretaries were taken away. So nurses and doctors had to type themselves. Mm-hmm. So not only was it that you couldn't write with a pen and paper, but you lost a lot of people and had to do this kind of work. And of course, that's not in the favor of AI when people mix that up. And say, okay, it's going to be even further.
I think it's being conflated a lot, you know, and the two. And for the police or whatever, I mean, you have this kind of situation where you have to spend so much time on administration instead of doing the real work. And I think AI can actually help a lot with that.
And you took the example of companies where you go on a website as a consumer, and any company that wants you as a customer, they will immediately adopt to what you want. They will have a drive, economic drive to change. But what we are talking about here in hospitals, police, and so on,
it's not my drive.
And they are also much more regulated. I've worked with elder service and social service, and a lot of the fantastic potential things you can do is limited because we have laws. You talked about this some weeks ago, that technology is an enabler, but then it's okay, what do we use it for, and do laws and regulation follow? But there is a huge possibility in the public sector.
But we have a couple of topics now, and I think we should let's go to the Amazon case now, and then I would like to talk about change and possibilities. And change management around these topics.
I think it's a good segue to move to GDPR, because you already mentioned it a couple of times, and then we can come to Amazon, because I think it's going to be even better segue there.
Good point.
So let's continue then, more or less. So you're segueing into change management in the public sector, and how this is also, you need to take another dimension of change management because you're dealing with regulations. Yeah. So if you continue explore, I think this is...
But if we try to define the topic at the hand, so to speak, regulation is a big problem in many ways. And we had new laws coming in 2018 that we had to adapt to and change to, right? And you had worked quite a lot with GDPR as well, right?
Yes, and I worked with this in unions. Yeah. So I'm working within those organizations, and I think when you tell somebody about GDPR, everybody can agree that it's good that our personal information is protected. Yeah. In a union, I mean, they work for the good of people. They don't want to sell bad products. So the challenge is, okay, why do we have to change everything? Because we don't want to do bad things. And especially unions, to be a member of a union is a critical information, just like medical information and religion and so on. Sensitive data, yeah. So the challenge is really, okay, this is a regulation or law that we think is good, but why do we need to change? Because it's really a hassle. You can't send emails, you can't have your old data, you need to go to the system, it changes a lot, and you need to close your door and close your computer, and why do we need to do that? And it is to protect us. with
so the intention is good. Really.
The intention is good, and to have people understand that even if your intention is good, you need to protect. And in Sweden, it's not a dramatic thing to be a member of a union, but it is in other countries, and a lot of people that come here come from countries where it is, and it might change here as well. You don't know. So we need to conform with this, sometimes they get really annoyed with us when they say, oh, we want to do this really good thing for our members. And I say, you can't do that because that is not the purpose that you collected their personal data. So you can't do it. Or you have to have security, so it's impossible to work in the system. So that is the challenge. Of course, we want to protect with laws our information, and that is when it comes to social services for municipalities. When you have income support, there has been some AI implemented in municipalities, but there are court cases right now where it's being questioned if it's right to do it that way. So it can help, but is it allowed?
So I mean, I've seen a lot of bad examples of how GDPR's, implications or ramifications of being implemented has turned out rather poorly, even though the intention is bad. And
did you mean the intention was bad?
No, sorry, intention was good. Sorry, Thank you for correcting me.
Freudian slip, I would say.
Intention, of course, is great, and we want to make sure that we preserve the privacy of people. But then it can potentially hinder the innovation of, what can you use data for? And if you don't have signed off for using the data for a specific purpose, you're not allowed to do so without, the explicit consent of the user. So what would you say your recommendation is in how to apply GDPR from a change management point of view that still allows some form of innovation? Do you have any suggestions there? Or
First of all, it's really a management issue, the top management to involve. It's sort of, it must be an IT thing. But it is a management issue to look through your processes, because a lot of things you do because you've always done it. Should we do it that way? Can we change? So I would say that GDPR is an enabler for really optimizing your processes and making it better.
That's a new view.
That's a new view. Let's explore that one. How do you mean?
Instead of doing a lot of manual work where you collect personal information, store it locally on computers, and you lose it and you don't have control, you force it into being used into quite a locked and protected system. So you have to log into the system, you have to work in the system, and even if you don't like the system, so how can we adapt it in the best possible way? But if we do everything from there, we don't need all the other things. And in many organizations, when new systems are implemented, what we spoke about before, you don't go all the way. So you implement some steps of work, but people still work manually around the system and do things. So GDPR is really an opportunity to clean that up and to get people working according to processes. It doesn't mean that everybody will like it, but you will have to look at, okay, why is this important to us? Why? Of course, it's a law, but what is the value for our organization? How can we benefit from this to clean up and start working? And at the same time, you must be able to work. You can't build, of course, we can put a lot of IT security, but it would take you 45 minutes to get started in the morning. Do you want that? No. Okay, then you have to change.
But I think this is quite profound, and almost first I thought it was provocative how it can be a GDPR as an enabler. But the interesting thing is that we have already concluded in other topics that when we talk about the data and AI divide, the normal companies versus the super giants, we have already concluded several times that they don't really have a problem with GDPR because they have so strong systems and they have so strong processes around data. So for them to have the data lineage sorted and get that sorted, it's not a problem. And what Anna is saying right now, instead of looking as GDPR as a major pain to try to implement that on your shitty manual processes, use that as a leverage to get into systems that are more robust.
But let me then be a devil's advocate in some way.
Yeah.
and I mean, I do agree. I mean, we should have more control of the data we use and what we use it for, and have routines to manage, erasure and whatever, and explanations for whatever kind of decision support system you're using. But it is also really hard for SMEs or small companies to implement all these kind of things and make sure that they have documented routines for all these kind of things. So it is also in some way hurting the innovation in small companies. Wouldn't you agree?
That depends on, I would say, on the view that you take on the documentation. I mean, nobody says that you need to buy a special program and put your processes in there. You can actually you can have a piece of paper and write the process and define it.
But how do you know it's valid so you don't get sued for like 4% of your revenue then?
You need to make sure, and that is the task of a manager, are people working according to the process? But that's one thing, that you follow your own routines, but how do you even know if the routines that you define are valid and conforming to GDPR? I would say that GDPR focuses more on the purpose. Are you allowed to have the data, and what is the purpose? And then the other part is about information security. How do you secure your data? And do you have a thought on that?
Maybe. I'm just a bit subjective on this matter because I've seen a number of companies that have a really trouble.
I think the bottom line is very few companies seems to have grasped what GDPR really is and how to tackle it. So they go knee-jerk reaction, better safe than sorry, and they stop doing things they should be doing. But you're actually talking now from a GDPR literate standpoint, and highlight that, well, if you really understand what it is, do the process, have it documented, and then you can cope. So it's like one part of the change management is to adopt and be data literate or GDPR literate.
Yeah, and if I may comment on that, what I think when GDPR was announced, there was a huge rally. You had lawyers and consultants.
Hype.
Really. And I mean, if you read, I heard on the podcast that you had also read the original document. And if you slam that onto the table and say, people, we are going to help you with this. I mean, you can do almost anything. But if you look at the bottom line, what is it that you are required to do? And if you have an incident, how shall you handle that? You will not get fined because you have an incident, but if you don't learn from it and change, then you will be. And if you have not a good case for why you have the data, and I mean, you don't publish it on the front of your office, you have tried to the best, and you explain, okay, this is how we tried. Then the integrationsmyndigheten, they can say, okay, you made a fault in your thinking, but you can never get away by saying, oh, we didn't think.
It's good in some sense, and let me.
I can tell this is a tough subject for you.
No, but as I said, I think the intention is great. But let me quote, this is a professor in law in Sweden, and she, I think, phrases it very, very well, saying, of course, the intention is good. The problem is that the lack of knowledge, the uncertainty in how to implement it, that is the problem. Yes, if absolutely. You know about how to implement it, it's not really a big thing. The problem is that we don't really know how to do it, and the knowledge is lacking. So I think, speaking about the AI agenda that was formally launched this week, and one of the things they recommend there, which I think is rather good, is that the new Integrationsmyndigheten, how do you say it in English? I don't know, a privacy agency, I guess, or something, which was previously Datainspektionen in Sweden. They perhaps should not only, validate and confirm that people are abiding by GDPR, but they should also guide people in how to do it. Absolutely. That's similar to actually Finansinspektionen, yes. And they actually do have also guidance in saying, if you follow these rules, you will be rather safe. So not only having oversight committee, so to speak, but also having some kind of guidance and giving examples, this is how you should do it. Yeah. If we do that, then perhaps more companies could be more confident in actually using data and AI and still abiding by GDPR.
Yeah, because I completely agree there, because that is what many have been asking for when we approach that date, 25th of May.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what shall we do? Is this right or wrong? And what they came back saying is, well, we need some lawsuits and see what
you have to wait for someone gets sued, and that's kind of a weird thing to say.
How was it interpreted? And that's law. Yeah. How was it interpreted? Yeah. And so that I totally agree. But I still think they are doing a good job on trying to guide. But really, it's a situation where they can't say this is what it's like, because it's.
But maybe we can get the inside track a little bit, Anna, because I know you're working in some projects together with, you are teaming up in different projects, and one of your teammates is a certified from Datainspektionen or the Integrity Myndigheten, right?
Certified data protection officer, dataskyddsombud.
Dataskyddsombud, yeah. According to
to the regulations, yes.
And Datainspektionen owns, or now Integritetsmyndigheten owns this regulation in Sweden.
They own the responsibility for GDPR. I don't know if they know.
So the GDPR is European law, but I think they own the enforcement, like Förändringsledning.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you have worked, from this context, do you have any inside tracks on the thinkings? Because we have actually had that on this podcast to understand how does Finansinspektionen work versus Datainspektionen, and one part which is a little bit where I think Finansinspektionen is doing a great job in this, how they go consultative and guiding around their job is quite smart. And have you seen any of those ideas? Have you heard anything about that?
That would be my wingman or wingwoman. Yeah. She's the one that knows about that. So I completely lean on her. And so I wouldn't be the right one to say anything on the topic. But I completely agree about the need. And what I know, for example, the unions, they got together and had some lawyers, and they sat down and said, how shall we interpret this from a union point of view? And then everybody sort of said, okay, this is how we will, and had some communication. So, I mean, that's one way to try to handle it, but still there's a lot of work to do.
Speaking about how to handle it, what do you think about these huge terms of service kind of agreement that you sign when you use whatever kind of service, saying, yes, I accept, and then, you have no idea what they really want to use it for, but still everyone does it. Do you think that's a good thing?
I mean, it's completely worthless. That's my personal point of view. I mean, when you're on a website, you want to book that trip, you want to buy that book, you want to get that information. And it's like, I mean, it's the same as when you open a new bank account or where you buy a car, you don't read all the...
Exactly, yeah.
So everybody just clicks, I accept.
Yeah. And obviously that's a big problem, right? Because it makes the big companies being able to handle these kind of things, because they just change something in the small lining, so to speak, and then they can, do whatever. But for other companies, they can't.
Yeah, and what people feel is that GDPR is just an obstacle because I have to click this every time. Instead of thinking, what does this really mean? It means I'm giving my whole life away. Maybe I should stop here.
Why should I give you cookies?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a comment on that. Maybe those people who wrote the GDPR should have taken change management into calculation when they did it.
Oh, thank you. This was the comment. So
awesome.
How do we maybe change?
Isn't that a really profound thing? GDPR was a good intention, but it was horribly managed in some way.
And if we bring change management perspective into also regulation topics, how will this be implemented? How will we impact this? I bet you the laws will look different. Yeah. That's a good one.
That's a really profound. I think, we have to close on that, because that was such a good, statement.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. And it really tells, the need for change management as well. I mean, if you don't do this properly, it will have really bad
do it
impacts.
Early, right? Think about when you are early into your project or policy, how will this be implemented, and what changes do we need to have as tools around this for this to fly?
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
should we move to Amazon a bit?
Okay, let's go. I mean, I have to give you Amazon. Let's go.
I mean, we have to have some more technical topic as well. And and you're an author as well, and spend a lot of time writing. And you're right now preparing, the English version of your book, Change Management. And you've been working with, I guess, Swedish publishers mainly, or Studentlitteratur, or
Yes.
And then, and just give some background about this, Amazon was, starting up in the book industry, and they really revolutionized and disrupted, I would even say, the whole book publishing industry. Now they disrupted so much more. The same thing happened with music and Spotify in some sense, and Uber and whatnot, and Airbnb and so many things. But I think today, at least in US, if you want to publish a book, you have no option, I would say, without going through Amazon. Otherwise, you wouldn't sell books. And then they, removed the need for having editors. They removed the need to have publishers. They removed the need to have distribution, and everything, is being managed by a single organization, which is Amazon. And you may hear I don't have always positive sentiments about Amazon. But what's your thinking about this when you have these kind of big tech giants like Amazon coming in and disrupting an industry like the book publishing industry? Do you think it's good, bad? What can you do about it?
There were so many questions at the same time,
yeah,
and it's so many.
Sorry for that.
It stirs so many things, and actually, it really it was the wrong topic because it stirs me. I'm a bookworm. I want physical books, and
so you get passionate. All right,
and I want to go into a bookstore where you can feel the smell of the books, and you can feel them in the shelves and so on. So it's sort of a bad. So if
choose
we could
whatever part of it.
You should have chosen.
I want to get some fire. Let it out, Anna. Let it out.
So maybe it had been better to talk about Uber or something, because I really think the disruption part is really good.
But not my books.
but I wouldn't say that it's. I would step back from Amazon. It's really about the possibilities of internet, because in a small pond like Sweden, you can publish your own book. You can market it on. I have colleagues that they have written books, published it and marketed it on LinkedIn and their own web page and some Google AdWords and sold books. So. Maybe Amazon showed the way in some, but somebody else would have found the self-publishing and that part. And then it's about how do you do? I mean, the US is such a huge market, and you can write a book on anything. As an author of a book that was being published, I mean, I've always enjoyed writing. I thought I was a good writer. But when we left the first manuscript and then got it back, first of all, the coaching by the publisher, and then got it back by a professional language person.
Proofreader,
yeah, because we were 3 people writing a book, and she made it one book. We could have published the book ourselves, and maybe, at least to the practitioners, we might have been able to sell it, but it wouldn't have been such a good book if we didn't have the publisher.
And the editor.
And the editor.
But still, don't you see, I think in US, and I may be wrong on the numbers now, but I think Amazon stands for more than 50% of all the book sales in US or something.
Yeah, it makes my heart bleed for all the bookstores, yeah.
Yeah, and so many bookstores have been forced to close because of that. And is going back a bit to the AI divide kind of problem, and the problem when you have a company that becomes a bit too successful, and other companies don't have the stamina to keep up, so to speak. What do you think? Yeah, okay. I'm trying to concise it into a good question. There's so many different aspects here, but. Do you think that digitalization will happen, of course, and people will still write books and read books, no question about that. But do you think it's good that we consolidate that into a single digital publisher in some way, like Amazon or Spotify or Uber or something? Do you think in general that's a good move forward that enables people more than help? Or
It's always, I mean, I would say that it's still too early to answer that question. But if we look at an other market, when I grew up in the 70s, were these big stores where you could buy your food. There were no butchers or cheese shop or whatever in Sweden, at least. I mean, you had the big supermarkets. And now we have the butchers coming back and the cheese, and people make beer out, and you have microbreweries. I grew up with, it was Prips. I mean, you have the microbreweries. So, I mean, that people want something back. And of course, with the pandemic, a lot has moved to e-business, and the big companies can do this, but it might come back, we don't know, and be something new. Just like we all, a lot of people work from home in digital meetings. When we go back to work, I don't think we will go back 100%, and it will not be 100% digital. We will find different ways. So we can't stop things like Amazon to happen. Personally, I mean, it hurts my feelings, but it will happen, and then we will see what happens. Maybe it will change into something completely different, because people don't want the Amazon way. I don't know.
But now I want to take the next topic, and you have already made the segue to some degree. So a new topic here, like let's talk about change management in the light of the pandemic. And the practice of work, or how we work, digitalization and all that is a big topic. Let's have a context now that I give you. This is a real example, but I will address it who it relates to. But let's say we have a company who has been working in an analog way before. Maybe it's with customers and stuff like this. And now all of a sudden we have worked in a new way where basically we have met customers, we have done different things differently because we had to in the corona. And then we realized we should probably continue to work differently. Maybe it's one thing how we have the office, but equally is about like the cost of going and meeting customers. Can we be more virtual? Can the whole view of how we work look differently? So could we just elaborate of, do we think that? And from a change perspective, the change management aspect, if you want to stick to some of the good practices, could we elaborate on this a little bit? And please take it in any direction you want.
Yeah, well, I've had comments from several customers that their digital journey took a leap 3 to 5 years ahead. And some that have been struggling say that what was impossible half a year ago is now possible. But the circumstances were extreme. It was not just that our organization had to change or our department. No. It was a whole globe. So nobody really questioned that we need to do this. So there was no discussion, why do we need to do it?
So the environment for change was like the perfect storm. Yeah. Not only did your boss said you had to change, everybody's bosses said, or everybody had to comply. So actually the change had no barriers outside as well. Yeah,
it was really nobody telling you to change. You just, you stayed at home and you wanted to work. So how am I going to do it?
But the risk is now, I think if we have had positives, I mean, like it's crazy to say, but we have maybe digital positives out of Corona. And now the pressure goes back or down. So theoretically, we could work like we did before. Yeah. How can we not go back to how can we optimize the benefit? So what will be required, do you think?
What has happened is that people have actually seen that this works. And the proof of concept, so to say. You don't have to do a lot of events. It's a proof of concept. And we have had the opportunity to grow because the expectations were so low, because it was really a crisis. Yes. So from the beginning, if you just got a sound on your computer, that was a good thing. And then if there was a picture, even if the meeting was crappy, you had a picture. Yay. So we grew from very low expectations. to some extent, it has now been accepted, and the bar rises all the time. So now people don't want to be in a crappy team meeting, even if we know it works and so on. But the requirement, and now in the change community, there's a lot of discussions. How do we handle where people are not coming together when you don't have the social interaction? How shall managers work? How do managers really make good meetings? And then it's about management and team. How do we want to work in the future? One thing is to do like Spotify and say, okay, everybody can choose for themselves. But I think every organization needs to ask, okay, how do we want to guide people? What do we think is the best for this organization? And to be much, much better. We talked a bit about when I came to the studio, what requirements do we have on the technical parts, and from the beginning almost nothing, and it rises all the time. So the digital part will be much, much better, but I'm absolutely sure it's going to be a mixture.
But I have to ask you, from a change management point of view, didn't the whole pandemic was a really interesting learning experience in terms of if you really put you against the wall and force you to change to work from home, like super rapidly, you can do it.
Yeah.
Right?
The pandemic has proven over and over again, with adversity or a common threat or a common goal, we are capable of change in a completely different speed and to a completely bigger impact.
So is the solution and learning from that to actually be successful with change management, we need to be a bit more severe, or we need to put people against the wall, so to speak?
No, I think it's how strong is the why.
It is definitely.
The bottom line is, how strong can you make the why? If the why is strong enough, then change is easy. It's the weakness of the why for the individual, for society, for the organization, and they don't even line up. Like, it's good for the company, it's not good for the environment, and it's not good for me. I'm not going to do this change. So I think how big is the why? If you can amplify the why for all, shareholders, for the company, for you as an individual, you probably have an easier journey.
But we still must agree that, if we do express the why or really get the why demanded to us, we can change much faster than we thought, right?
Absolutely. And in this case also, everything around us changed.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you implement a change in an organization, sales organizations where we want sales reps to be more advisors and business partners, but we still measure how many visits do you make. So to change and you still keep the old structures. In this case, with the pandemic, all the structures changed as well. So that made it easier.
You need to measure them. I can't measure how many visits he made because we're not allowed to do visits. What do I measure now? Mm-hmm. Bottom line,
and also sometimes when you implement a change, you keep the old ways of measuring and you keep the old structures around the team that changes or the individual, which makes it harder. Now everything changed. That also makes it easier.
But this brings us into another favorite topic. I want to take first principles.
I was saying perhaps we should have a new T-shirt saying we should make a Corona change.
Corona change.
Saying, that is like a disruptive change that happens super rapidly because we have a strong why.
Yeah, but hear me out here.
It's a T-shirt. How strong is your why? I think it will.
How strong is your why?
I think it's good.
Make sure that Simon Sinek hasn't printed it yet.
Yeah, how strong is your why? I have two really concrete topics that I want to cover, and Anna can choose. One is about first principles and basically breaking down and reinventing something from scratch. Let's talk about that, and that also has a change implication. The other one is more tips and tricks around change management. How do you work with that in practice now when you can't meet physically? So what's your best tips and tricks how you work with change when you can see each other physically, and how do we do it now when we need to deal with change when it's all digital? So this is one topic. But I actually want to segue into the first principle topic first. So there's two topics that,
The first principle, you have to guide me there, because I'm not really.
Okay, so let me try to set up this context. So when you are meeting great people, you start exploring what's the fundamentals to success. And then we've had some good examples, and we have talked a lot about this. And I think you inspired me to, you get some, different role models or different people who talks about different things. So Elon Musk, he used the word and talks about first principles, and other people's do it, of course. But first principles means, in a way, it comes, if you Google it, it means from a philosophical point of view to go down to the core. And the easiest way when we talk about this is you have some sort of example. If you basically look at any type of business or process or how things are done, what happens if you challenge it to the core? We have built rockets in one way forever, and we build rockets, we build big tanks, we shoot up the rocket, and then the rocket explodes, and we can never reuse it again. So first principle thinking, Elon Musk. What happens if I question if we need to shoot and blow up rockets, if we can land them? So he basically go back to the core of this, and he did the same in the battery space. A battery costs $800 per kilowatt hour, but he looks at the components. Technically, it's $8 worth of raw material. Can we fundamentally redo this? And we can take first principle from a business perspective. Car manufacturer like Volvo can define themselves as a car manufacturer, or they can strip themselves down to the core and understand actually we provide transport, so we define M. So the interesting thing now is when we come with data and AI and all that, this is the difference about having an analog process and putting data and AI on top, and then first principles really reinventing with the data and AI first in mind. So first principle for me is the fundamental when you go change down to the core, and then when you put the pieces together, as you said with the book, you build it up in another way. So I would like to explore what's the implication when you try to truly take a process or a new business model, and you think, the concept is clear in your head now, you have understood that you can do something else. But of course, the change management process is very, very different.
But couldn't we phrase it a bit like this? So, imagine that you have a new idea and you want to implement it. And we have spoken a lot about the change management process for doing that. But another way to also think about this is, what is the change we need to do? How do you come up with that? How do you come up with, we need to do a change, and what should that change be? And then when you come up with some idea, then you implement it, and you need to do the proper change management to implement that and make sure it happens. But another question is simply, how do you come up with the change itself?
Yeah, but now we are arguing because there are two different questions, in my opinion. One is the thought process to reinvent, and one is the understanding that if I incrementally go this way, my change management will be this. But if I go down this path, my change management will be quite different. So we can take both comments.
But you see my point. I think that the first principle reasoning part is about coming up with the change.
Yes,
it's not about implementing the change. And I think these are two different processes that you have.
But that's the more the creative part, and have the crazy people with the thinking hats, and you're allowed to come up with any idea really. But then the next step, and you shouldn't apply change or think about implication, because then Amazon wouldn't have done what they had, and we wouldn't have iPhones.
And, because I'm in step 2 mode, because I'm a little bit like innovation can come from anyone, and let it be the crazy people.
It can come from anyone, but it should.
But then we get into a conservative company, and they really want to reinvent now. And now the whole process of how to implementing that, I was actually thinking about when your change is, disruptive, when your innovation is really disruptive, what you call it, innovation, what Stefan called it, like we have the different levels, right? Incremental versus disruptive.
Yeah, but again, what you do there is you bring in the ones that you know are so different from you, the ones whose shoes you should actually step into, the ones that you want to shoot your project down, and let them help you define, like you said, okay, this way or that way. What is the change? What is the bigger change, or what is the easier change? And then you will have to choose which way to go, and you can always take the bigger change, but then you have to prepare for that. It's like you can go on a really long trip, but you have to prepare and pack for that.
So the basic answer is that even if it's a disruptive change that you're bringing about, the fundamentals are similar.
Yes, absolutely.
What about success? Can you disrupt yourself, or are you better off if you want to set up a new company or a new process that you almost do that like in an incubator or in a different process? So, the resistance to change can maybe be too great. Are there other mechanisms that, tactics?
Yeah, when you look at a change, one of the things that you see is, okay, what is the culture within this company? Is this a company where we like to do different things every 2 months? Or is this a company where we do the same thing? Is safety important, or is crazy important? And that should give you the answer to, okay, do I need to set up a different company, or do I want to change the one that I have? And it will always take more resources to change the one you have.
Cool. And we spoke about AI and disruption, the change it will have in, I think, the society in general in coming 10 years in more profound ways than people think. And I'm a bit reluctant to move into this topic, but I still want to do that in the last couple of minutes before we move into the final questions. But if we take one of the more negative disruptions that will happen because of automation, it could be, for example, truck drivers in US. I think they stand for like 30% of the job market or something. And obviously it's going to be, the whole transportation sector is going to be heavily disrupted rather quickly now. How, and for the people working in that they need to make a change. And some of the ideas, if you listen to Andrew Young and others, they're speaking about the UBI, this kind of universal basic income and things like that, to be able to handle this big change in the society. This is a very philosophical and hard to answer question, so sorry for that. But still, we know that some parts of the society will have to go through a big change in coming 10 years. Do you have any thoughts about, how to make that happen? Do you, for example, believe in UBI, the universal basic income, or how should we handle people that where, the jobs they have will be disrupted rather?
Yeah. Can you explain universal? Yeah.
So universal basic income is basically let everyone have $1,000 or 10,000 crowns per month, no matter what job you have. It's an opt-in kind of system, and you get money, everyone, not something you can perhaps live by completely, but at least it's something that allows you to have some income. And that something can potentially help you to transition into a new type of work, or to educate yourself, or do some kind of reskilling or upskilling that moves you into another field. But that means that the universal basic income is something you basically pay a salary to everyone, the whole population, or at least to everyone that opt-ins for it. And that is potentially a way to handle this big disruption that's going to happen. What do you have any thoughts about how do we handle this potential big, it's not going to happen for everyone in the society, but for some sectors it can be a big disruption.
I think it will affect more sectors than we can imagine. And also it's not completely new. I mean, since industrialization, so many works have disappeared, and others that we wouldn't have imagined have emerged.
Exactly.
And there's not always a one-to-one match between the new ones and the ones that emerge. And so I see there are so many angles to it, and one is the ones that are now being educated and going into the market, to actually have an education system where the thinking is that you will probably have several jobs, different profession careers during your work life, no matter if you're in a more practical work or if you're university and master degree, it will change. And so I'm in Sweden. I mean, I'm Swedish, brought up here with the thinking. I mean, we have the system where anybody could go to the university because you can borrow money. What has been done now because of the pandemic, they have there's a higher age where you can actually get that money, and there is a discussion that it should be given maybe lifelong, as long as you could work at least, so you could actually go to the university. And if you look at the UBI, I mean, if you look at the big innovations, were the people that were really wealthy or were the ones that really struggled? So maybe I'm too much into sales, but some struggle, and you have, in Sweden at least, we have a kind of basic security, and that combined with talking about and having a, like I say, philosophical discussion, that we will have to change during our lives, and for some it's going to be a challenge, because if you're older today and it's not obvious what you could change into, but we have to change the way we think about work and upgrading certain work careers that have not been very highly thought of.
But I think this is actually very to the point, that if we rethink education and the fundamental institution of education as not something you do between a certain age, but as a lifelong obligation or expectation, and take away the stigma of losing a job or changing a job, it's actually to have different career paths. That's the new normal, right? Mm-hmm. So it means we will have university and you will go in and out of university. What's the problem? It's a mind shift, of course, and it's a change of system. But if we understand that we will have adult learning or lifelong learning, and we will have career changes, and now how does the system look like? I'm with Anna. I'm not so afraid anymore. But it's a different system. We can't go on with an old system that doesn't fit this.
And we have to change, I think, the thinking that, okay, it's a three-year full-time education, or and also talk about what kind of education and what could you actually do. There was a discussion that a lot of people that were laid off partially during the pandemic, there was, they didn't go to study. Well, maybe they didn't understand for how long this was going, and what should I study? So to have that discussion as a public conversation, and
but do you think it changes the system? I think it changes the underlying system as well. Yeah. To be then fit for a slightly different purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, there are this topic could go on for several hours. There are so many changes. I mean, the fundamentals of our educational system is built to provide the industry, which is producing industry with managers and workers, and we are trying to fix it, and we are in a completely different paradigm today, where that is not the case. That's not what the work field needs. So there's a big gap with what education produces and what is needed, and the abilities.
You open up Pandora's box.
But time is now 7 o'clock. Perhaps we should try to start to close off a bit.
Come on, we do another hour. No, I mean, like, this is a great topic for the after work. But we usually end up the conversation on a couple of similar questions every time, and the first I want to ask you is like, what's next in your life? We know about the book now, but what else is sort of happening, where are you at right now? What's happening next in Anna's life?
I've been working with the same projects now for some time. In change management, you work more or less depending on in what phase. So I have several projects. So really it's now dipping my toe into maybe starting something completely new in that term. So that's exciting.
Can you tell us about it? Or is it
no? And then as we discussed when I came here, I've raised myself a level with my home studio, but I feel that I should go another level to be when I hold digital like lectures and trainings. And so that's, and as I said.
But you have a digital coach here for your home studio in Goran.
Yeah, I found him today. So it's going to be onwards and upwards.
I think so. Very cool.
You can always come here and record your sessions. No problem. I will help you.
Then I don't have to learn.
That sounds great. And so there's been an uprise of this sort of doing it at home, but studio, lectures, stuff like this.
Yeah, I would never have imagined. I have a group of managers that are leading a very tough change that I have trained since autumn, and we will be ready in a month. I've never met them. It's the first group, because I work with people change management. It's the first group. I've never met them. I will not meet them until we're ready. It's really strange. And I'm driving a change project with people in Australia.
This is one of the topics I wanted to talk about.
I'm driving a change project in Australia, and with the time differences, I mean, I don't enjoy flying for 25 hours, but to spend time in a room for several days, that would have made a huge difference.
And an Australian company or Swedish company?
Swedish company,
yeah. Oh, we have so many more topics. All right, but last question. If you were to recommend someone that you would want to hear on these podcasts, do you have a good recommendations for us, Ron? Whatever.
You should have asked me that before, because now I'm totally blank. But have you had somebody from Integrationsmyndigheten? Because you have.
No, we haven't. But that's a good idea.
Yeah, that or DIG.
Yeah, we know DIG people.
We know several people of DIG, and we kind of have them on the list.
Yep. But we are waiting for Patrick Ekemo to come down.
Patrick Ekemo is our favorite. We like him a lot. But do you have a name for us? Or have a connection? Could you help us?
I have to get back on that.
So get back and through your friend a connection at Integritetsmyndigheten.
Yes.
That would be very good. I think that's a great idea.
I think so too.
So with this, I think thank you very much, Anna. What a fantastic theme, change.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. Many topics.
And even very interesting for me as a tech person, I must say. So I'm positively surprised with the great discussion. So,
he's like, I want to talk about neural networks.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really great. And we can dive into some of the topics we'll stay on.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.